Hello everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp. Today we've got a review for you of the new Turtles game that's just released on the Switch. This is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Wrath of the Mutants, which actually released in arcades back in 2017 and is based on the 2012 series of this popular franchise.
It's developed by Cradle Games and Raw Thrills and is said to be a reimagining of that original arcade game.
So is it, as Michelangelo would have said in this series, a booyakasha, or is it going to feel our wrath?
Ooh. Yakasha.
Let's find out. So we'll start with story then. It's not going to take very long because there isn't much of one at all, which is a bit disappointing to be honest. As soon as you start the game, you are presented with a level select screen. There is no cutscene at all. There is no setup for what you're doing. The only reason I'm even mentioning it is because when you complete the game, there is a cutscene. So there clearly was a story. They just didn't feel the need to introduce it to you.
Yeah, you would expect a reimagined version to heighten the experience rather than potentially water it down.
Yeah, let's move on to gameplay then, and we'll pick up on that reimagining angle. So basically it's a beat 'em up, as I'm sure you've seen by now, and there are 6 stages to fight your way through. Now this newest version of this arcade game does promise 3 new levels and 6 new boss battles. That's included within that 6 levels that I mentioned just now. So the original game only had 3 stages, which seems crazy small to me, to be perfectly honest. You can choose from the 4 turtles, and obviously the game is playable in co-op with up to 4 players. But it does borrow some elements from previous arcade games, most notably, as far as I saw, Turtles in Time, although for the most part, the vast majority of the game, it is its own thing. As I said, it is set in the 2012 universe, and it goes for 3D character models this time rather than 2D flat sprites, albeit it is still on a similar plane as you would find in a traditional beat 'em up.
Gameplay wise, it is very traditional, but it also isn't in quite a few fundamental aspects, namely the axis on which you fight.
Yeah, if you look at a traditional 2D beat 'em up, you fight on planes. So you are moving on the y-axis up and down, and you position yourself in such a way that you can hit an enemy without being hit back. That's the whole skill to beat 'em ups, to get through them without pummeling coins in an arcade or continuously pressing the restart button on a console. Because this has 3D character models, it means that when you move up and down, rather than your character stepping up and down but still looking left or right, they actually change direction in terms of where they're facing. This throws that angle off. Now this isn't the first game that's done this, don't get me wrong, but I do feel that in a beat 'em up, when this happens, it does make the gameplay feel less refined.
Yeah, the enemies being able to attack you from 360 degrees certainly changes the way you have to play this.
Yeah, again, if you imagine in a traditional beat 'em up, enemies that have a projectile of some description would be able to fire in 2 ways, left or right. Here they have 8-way movement. Now, although that seems like an upgrade, again, when you're trying to crowd control a number of enemies on screen and there's one all the way across, you're playing in one player, say, there's no way of getting to that enemy in time. So whereas in the past, the skill was to make sure you are not on that plane, therefore not getting hit by the bullet, here, you just have to take the hit because no matter where you stand, whilst you're crowd controlling, they'll hit you. So yeah, it's a byproduct of this change in character model. I don't think it makes such a good beat 'em up. Moving away from that though, and just looking at specifics of this game, you have a couple of attacks, not many to be fair. You have your standard attack by pressing Y. You have 2 different jump attacks. One is by pressing jump, which is B, and then pressing Y, but you can press jump and then jump again to do a jump kick. It is a bit weird having the jump and attack on the same button, I must say. There were a few times where I wanted to jump over something and pulled myself back down too quickly by pressing jump a second time. My mistake, but it would have been nice to maybe have that second attack assigned to one of the other buttons. You also have a special move which you can fulfill by pressing the X button when your power meter is full, and this will clear all enemies on screen. And there are a couple of weapons you can pick up, which, to be fair, do make nice nods to that 2012 show. You have like assist allies that come in and clear the screen for you, and even Ice Cream Kitty makes an appearance in terms of a projectile that you can throw, which again will knock all enemies down.
Now, as far as negatives, I think it's fair to say that the input latency isn't the best here.
Yeah, there is a problem with jumping that's not always noticeable, but I'll tell you when it certainly does become noticeable, and that's practically every boss that you fight in this game has a very similar attack pattern, and they all share one move in particular, which is that they will pound the ground and make like a wave appear, you know, which you then need to jump over. This happens with every boss in the game, and the jump doesn't seem responsive enough to be able to jump over this consistently. And the amount of times on my way to finishing this game that I got hit by that move and was questioning myself. It's like, is this me? Am I that bad? You know, my reflex is that bad. I played it with you, didn't mention it, and you said the same thing.
Yeah, I think the jump is actually tied to the frame rate here. And platforms like PS5 where it's 60 FPS are going to find that much more responsive.
In terms of the basic gameplay, I mean, it's not inherently bad. I mean, you could still have fun with it. And I suppose in some ways it almost depends on your level of experience with beat-em-ups. You know, I noticed that plane issue quite quickly, whereas other people might not. You find yourself just button mashing, and some people might think you do that in other beat-em-ups, whereas you can do that in other ones, and you could get through the game by brute force. But if you want to play it properly, in air quotes, you don't do that in beat-em-ups, and you can't but do that here.
No, this would be a very good entry-level Turtles beat-em-up for a child. Let's be real about it. They'd be able to button mash. They wouldn't have to think too heavily as long as it was on the easy mode. So I'd say that's maybe what they're targeting.
Quite possibly. With that in mind, gameplay gets 13 out of 20. Controls, owing to that issue that we mentioned with the jump, they get 12 out of 20. Let's move on to visuals, audio and performance, of course. Now, this is models, as we've said a couple of times now, on the 2012 show. Now, I was a big fan of that show, actually. Really enjoyed it. But the thing that I liked the least about it was its visual style. It went for a CGI look, had a very strange way of going about its character models, where most of the characters had disproportionately long arms and legs. Looked very slim, and this is obviously represented in the game. Now, it's not going to lose marks for that because it's represented that perfectly well, and it does definitely get the charm across in terms of its character models. The locations have been taken from the show to some degree, and I will give it credit in that just little details like when you use Raphael's special move, his eyes will turn into fireballs, which is what happened in the show whenever he got angry. So they have added little nuances like that. It doesn't fill you with the charm that previous Turtles games have. It doesn't feel like a love letter. This feels like it was made to fill a slot in someone's release calendar.
If I was to describe the art style, I think I would call it functional. So it's like functional 3D. We've seen it used in many games. The Nickelodeon have done this many times with some of their kart racers. They don't take the original charm, and actually it's a scenario for me where pixel art can actually do more justice to the originals than those 3D models.
Yeah, I mean, they couldn't have gone with pixel art for this particular series because it wouldn't have conveyed the source material well enough, but it does, functional is a good word. I think that serves it up quite well. In terms of performance, it's running at 30 frames per second. I did notice occasional stutters. I will say they weren't generally in actual gameplay. They were normally when you were transitioning from one screen to the next and the enemies presented themselves from, you know, doorways, alleyways. You'd notice a slight slowdown and then you'd start playing. So they weren't an issue in terms of actual gameplay. If we move on to audio then, the first thing I will say is that they have got the cast back in terms of voice acting from that 2012 show. So you've got people like Greg Sipes, Sean Astin, Seth Green, and Rob Paulson actually returns, having played Raphael in the original cartoon. He voices Donatello this turn round. It's nice to see them back, and it's definitely noticeable, but the lines they're given to work with are just too generic. You know, there are a few that get across the characters, but for the most part, they're one-liners they spout and you instantly forget, you know? My biggest issue, I'll be honest, with visuals and audios is just the lack of care in presentation. It's not the actual game itself. There's no attract mode, which for an arcade game seems almost criminal. You'd go to the arcade, you'd have so many options of what to play. They had to sell themselves very quickly. So you had like a 15-20 second loop of gameplay or, you know, some sort of opening credits almost, with the theme song playing that would make you go, yeah, I want to play that one. This doesn't do that at all. And it makes me think that the arcade release, I mean, obviously 2017, it must have been very small, or you said potentially like an in-house arcade for someone like Nickelodeon, which would make sense because there wasn't the competition of other machines to go up against. And also, just off a final note on audio, it doesn't even have the 2012 theme song. It has a rendition of it, a musical rendition, which is fine, but you'd expect to hear that theme song playing. You know, if you go back to the original Turtles arcade game, which released in the late 80s, you had a digital pixelated rendition of the cartoon in terms of how it started. There's none of that here. It feels very soulless, is the word I'm looking for. Visuals are into the fact that they do represent the cartoon or the source material very well. You get 15 out of 20. Audio doesn't fare quite as well. Whilst, again, it's nice to have the voice actors back, they don't do enough with their roles. It gets 14 out of 20.
That then takes us on to overall value. Now, this one retails at £24.99 or your regional equivalent, and there is a physical available for that as well.
Yeah, now for that price, I completed the game in the game told me I completed it in 1 hour and 48 minutes. Now, this isn't unheard of for an arcade beat 'em up. That's fine in terms of an arcade beat 'em up. Console specific beat 'em ups these days have started to extend that time. You'll get 5-6 hours out of a beat 'em up these days. But for one that was released in the arcades, I can accept that runtime. It's not worth £25 though. That's the problem. With all the other problems mentioned, it's just not worth that price. You know, it's fun enough, but I don't want to play games that are fun enough.
Yeah, especially when you consider that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge is £22.49 and is an exceptional beat 'em up.
Yeah, I mean, I would compare it more to the Cowabunga collection because that has pure arcade Turtles games on it, and they are similar in length. So I think that's a more fair comparison, but even that's about the same price. It might be a little bit more, I'm not sure. And obviously you get a whole bunch of games on there, including 2 of the best beat 'em ups ever made, you know. And that's not even to, if you move away from Turtles, the other beat 'em ups available on Switch as well. It's a genre that's very well represented, and this unfortunately doesn't cut the mustard. Value gets 9 out of 20. To conclude then, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Wrath of the Mutant is a decent beat 'em up, and no more than that. It's nice to see the 2012 series represented. It's a great series, but for me, the strength of that series was the interactions between characters, and this is sorely lost here. To have not even have an opening cutscene, to have no attract mode, even the end credits, without trying to spoil too much, is static images with text bubbles. There's not even voice acted ending, you know. It's disappointing, I must say. It's definitely more fun in co-op, although again, there are better options. But yeah, you'd have to wait for a sale here, I'm afraid.
Destroy the ones called the Turtles.
This is it!
Surrender.
Overall, it gets a SwitchUp score of 63%.
Thank you everybody for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, you can use our website, switchup.gg. You get your eShop cards there. You get 5% of your purchase price back in cash back. There's also links down there to some physical stores where you can pick up a few different physical games. And again, there are some codes down there to help with discounts, or there are affiliative links that do help the channel. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.
Had enough, punk?